Did you know that Mote Marine Laboratory, just across the bay behind you, has nearly 100 scientists doing world-class research on things like disease resistance in sharks and the wound healing capabilities of stingrays? That research holds great potential for advances in human health care and other fields. Or did you know that Florida, which is surrounded by water, actually imports more aquaculture products than any other state? And our country as a whole, even though we are surrounded by more ocean territory than any other nation, actually imports 90% of the seafood we consume. With that staggering trade imbalance, the potential for expanding Florida-raised seafood is tremendous. From aquaculture and sustainable seafood to biomedicine and clean water, our region literally brims with opportunities in the marine sciences. And that's what the report that Terry showed you earlier is all about, the one that's on your table. It's our blueprint for growing what we call the blue economy on the Gulf Coast. When you read it, you'll learn more about this largely hidden sector, and you'll discover ways that together we can transform our region into a hub of marine innovation. If you like that idea and you want to get involved in a big way and right away, then Gulf Coast has an opportunity for you, or rather a challenge. And this is pretty cool, and you might have read about it today in the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Today, Gulf Coast Community Foundation is launching a $500,000 incentive grant challenge to spur innovation in our region. The Gulf Coast Innovation Challenge is a grant competition designed to foster big ideas, encourage new partnerships, and reward regional vision. This inaugural challenge will focus on saving our seas, feeding our communities, and growing our blue economy. The challenge is open to teams from the nonprofit and private sectors. Gulf Coast will select up to 5 finalists to receive $25,000 grants to prototype their ideas. And from there, one winner may receive up to $375,000 in grant funding to bring their prototype to reality. You can learn all about the Gulf Coast Innovation Challenge at gulfcoastchallenge.org. Submissions open today, so good luck. So in developing our innovation challenge, Gulf Coast was indeed inspired by our guest speaker, the person you really came to hear today. It is with much pleasure that I get to introduce a man who was recently named one of the world's 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine, Dr. Peter Diamandis. Dr. Diamandis is an international pioneer in the fields of innovation, incentive competitions, and commercial spaceflight. He's chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which leads the world in creating large-scale global competitions to solve market failures. He's the co-founder and executive chairman of Singularity University, a Silicon Valley institution that studies exponential technologies and their ability to solve humanity's grand challenges. In the field of commercial space, Dr. Diamandis is co-founder and co-chairman of Planetary Resources, which is designing spacecraft to detect and mine asteroids for precious materials. Besides all of that and much more, Dr. Diamandis also finds time to write books. He's the best-selling author of Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, and his follow-up book, Bold, How to Go Big, Create Wealth, and Impact the World, came out just 3 weeks ago. Here to inspire us to think big, create bold new opportunities, and transform our region is Dr. Peter Diamandis.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Terry. And good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a pleasure actually to run in to some dear old friends from my childhood and from the last decade. So I'm going to open with a story that Terry asked me to tell that I told last night at dinner, which is the reason you should not be calling me Dr. Diamandis. That's my dad's name, actually. So I had the pleasure of going to medical school many, many years ago, mostly to make my mom happy. And also because if you weren't an Air Force pilot, the next highest probability of being selected as a NASA astronaut was if you were a physician. And so with those stats, I sort of rationalized going to medical school. The problem is, at my heart, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've had the pleasure of starting some 17 companies over the years. And 2 of those I started in my 4th year of medical school. And long story, I won't go into that portion of it, but in my 4th year of medical school, I had one of those early Motorola brick phones, which I would sneak out of surgery or sneak out of rounds to go and call and find out how the rocket engine tests go or what's going on with our negotiations. It was a university and a launch company I had. And towards the middle of my 4th year, I got called into the dean's office, Dean Tosteson, and he says, so what's up? What's up with you? You're on the phone all the time, which hasn't changed in the last 30 years. And your interns and your residents are telling me you're on the phone, you're not living up to what you should be doing. Do you want to graduate? And I fess up and I say, yes, I do want to graduate. You can imagine at this point the pressure's on. I'm like nearly in tears, and I say, but I've got these 2 companies going, and I love what I'm doing, and I really want to go into space, and it's my mission and my purpose. And he says, do you want to graduate? I said, yes. He goes, okay, I'll make you a deal. If you pass part 2 of the boards and you promise not to practice. So I'm very pleased that he kept his end of the bargain and I've kept mine. So I'll leave that. If we could put the slides on and leave them on the screen, that would be great. What I'd like to do is tell you a story of where we're going and the ability we have to really create an extraordinary world ahead. I titled this Abundance, the Future is Better Than You Think, which is also the name of a book that I had the pleasure to co-author with Stephen Kotler. And the book did very well in the New York Times and did well on Amazon. And it was a book that I was inspired to co-author because of the world I was seeing. I was seeing a very different world than most people were seeing. I remember this one conversation that took place in a coffee shop a couple years before where a young couple was saying, is it morally right for us to bring a kid into this world? And I was going, what world are they seeing? I'm seeing a very different world. And I started realizing that I was seeing a very different world from a lot of people. And it was that drive of what I was seeing from X Prize and from SU that got me to change my point of views and write this book, which is a book that flowed out, that was really a charge to change people's mindset. So I had the pleasure this year of closing out the Clinton Global Initiative. I was President Clinton's final speaker at CGI. And it turns out that President Clinton is a fan of the book that Stephen and I wrote. And he brought out a copy of Dog-Eared and was reading from it, introducing me. And at the end of his introduction, he said, Peter, why are you such an optimist? Don't you watch the news? And I said, well, honestly, President Clinton, I try not to. And I'm an optimist because of that and because I look at the data. And so one of the things I write about in Abundance and in Bold is that we're living during a day and age that the news media is a drug pusher. And negative news is their drug. And on every device that we get, our televisions, our radios, our newspapers, our tablets, our smartphones, we are being fed constantly negative news over and over and over again. And it turns out there's a reason for this. You know, the news media's job is to deliver your eyeballs, our eyeballs, to their advertisers. And it turns out that we pay 10 times more attention to negative news than positive news. And evolutionarily, this was a very good thing. You see, as we were evolving in the savannas of Africa hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, if you missed a piece of good news, like some food over there, well, that's too bad. You missed a piece of bad news, like, it's not a stick, but a snake on the ground, your genes are out of the gene pool. And so we evolved an ancient piece of our temporal lobe called the amygdala that scans everything we see and everything we hear for negative news. And if you see it, you're glued, right? The Dow is plummeting, there's a fire, whatever it is, you're on red alert and you pay attention. And the news media knows that, and the old adage we were discussing last night, if it bleeds, it leads. And so the question is that the way the world truly is? Is the world really that bad? Or is it what the news media feeds us over and over again? And over the last, period of, with due respect to the lives lost in the Malaysian airliner went missing, was that really all that was going on in the world for 2 years straight, for 2 months straight? So when I think about this and I write about it, the realization is that over the last 100 years, and the ambulance is coming in straight on cue here, of course. Thanks, guys. As I think about this, over the last 100 years, by almost every measure, the world has gotten extraordinarily better. Over the last 100 years, the income for every nation, the per capita income, has more than tripled. The human lifespan has more than doubled. The cost of food has dropped 13-fold. The cost of energy has dropped 20-fold. The cost of transportation has dropped 100-fold. The cost of communications has dropped thousands of fold. We truly are living in a time that is extraordinary. This is the cover of The Economist magazine from 18 months ago. It talks about we're heading towards the end of poverty. I was at Davos this year. The projections are that we will have gone from 70 in 2010 to 35 countries in extreme poverty this year to 0 in 20 years. That we truly are taking the world out of extreme poverty. This is a friend of mine's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And what he writes about in this book, what Steven Pinker writes about, is that we're truly living during the most peaceful time ever in human history. Now, you wouldn't know that watching the Crisis News Network or the Constantly Negative News Network or whatever you want to call CNN. But truly, if you open up the newspaper tomorrow morning and look at the number of negative news articles, look at the number of negative news stories and ask yourself, is that the way the world really is? I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying it's disproportionately fed to us. And such constantly negative news changes our mindset and changes the way we view the world. And the world, by almost every measure, is extraordinarily better. And I hope that we'll have this conversation today, because if I can help you just see the world that way, that I believe there is no problem we cannot solve, period, end of statement. That we're living in a time where 1,000 years ago, the only people who could solve anything at a national or global level were the kings and queens, and basically all they could do was deploy their troops. 100 years ago it was the robber barons, the industrialists who could build a railroad or a factory or something to make a difference. Today it's any of us. Today it's any of the innovators that you're calling to action with your prize here. Today it is millions of people empowered by AI, by the cloud, by all the technologies we're going to talk about that can truly change the world. I love this. Here's some statistics. We're also redefining poverty. So in America today, the poorest people in America, the people below the poverty line, 99% have water, electricity, flushing toilets, refrigerators. 95% have a television, 88% have a telephone, 70% have a car, and access to air conditioning. Right? If you think about it, the robber barons, the wealthiest people on the planet, had none of that 150 years ago. But yet, the poorest people today have that. We are raising the poverty line, what we define as poverty. So I teach this. I teach this at a university I had the pleasure of co-founding in Silicon Valley. It's a new university, started 7 years ago. I serve as the executive chairman. And Ray Kurzweil, Ray is considered the smartest guy in the field of AI, as the chancellor. And we created a university that is focused on the most powerful technologies on the planet. Artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology, digital medicine, 3D printing, the technologies that are doubling in power year on year on year. And we teach graduate students. We have 5,000 applicants for 80 spots. And our goal for those graduate students is start a company that can impact 1 billion people in 10 years' time. That's the metric of success. Because today, an entrepreneur in their garage can start a product or service that can touch the lives of 1 billion people. That's a crazy idea, but that is where we are today. That's the level of reach a single individual can have. All of that is being made possible by computational power. So this curve over here, on the left-hand axis is the amount of computer power that $1,000 can buy you. Along the bottom is 110 years of time between 1900 and 2010. And what we're seeing here is that the march of computational power is constant. We don't see the recession or the depression, the boom time or the good time. We see faster and faster computers. We're building faster computers that are helping us build the next generation of faster computers, and so forth and so on. And if you continue that, you get extraordinary progress. So this is a image of the first integrated circuit. These are 2 transistors in 1958. In 1971, this is the first integrated circuit, and it's got 2,300 transistors on this. It's built in 1971 by Intel. And this is, in 2012, an NVIDIA chip. And what I want to share with you is that it's 100 billion-fold times faster. Right? Over the course of 40 years, it's 100 billion-fold number of chips per dollar per square millimeter. And this is what's driving this massive computational speed. Some stats to get you thinking about this. I mentioned this last night. In the weekend in which the iPhone 6 came out, just the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the iPhone 6 went for sale. The iPhone 6 unit sold in that weekend accounted for more transistors than existed on the entire planet Earth in 1995. Right? In one device, in one weekend sale. In 2010, the computer we have at home was computing at 100 billion calculations per second. More computational power than the US government had in the 60s and 70s. By 2023, the stat is that the average computer you can go and buy from Best Buy, if they're still around, is going to be an average $1,000 computer is now calculating at 10 to the 16th cycles per second, which is just a number, unless you speak to someone who studies the brain, who says that's the rate at which your brain and my brain does pattern recognition. So what happens when $1,000 can buy you the computational power of a human mind? That's 8 years from now. 25 years later, $1,000 now buys you the computational power of the entire human race. Now your kid's homework gets really easy. So the interesting thing is that on top of this massive growth of computational power, faster and faster computers is growing a whole set of additional technologies that use computers, and because the computers are getting faster, these technologies are also themselves getting faster. And these are things like sensors and networks. We're living in a world today of 12 billion connected devices. I just ordered for my kids, who are 3.5 years old, a little device that is an AI-enabled doll that you can talk to and will answer you whatever questions you have. And you push the doll and it talks to you. And Cody, who's traveling with me here, a member of my team, was saying, you know, your kids in a couple of years are going to start talking to everything. Because the assumption is that everything is going to be online and intelligent. And it's true. I mean, today my kids, and those of you who have young kids here, are swiping the TV, trying to make everything move. But very quickly, everything is going to be connected. I was just at Davos, and Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, was talking about this concept called the internet is going to disappear. And what instead, everything is going to instead be connected. So 12 billion connected devices today will be 50 billion by 2020, maybe 100 billion. And each of those devices has a dozen sensors. We're heading towards a world of 1 trillion sensors, where anything you want, you're going to be able to know. So we have our own ocean-related X Prize going on in ocean to measure acidification of the ocean. We're developing brand new generations of low-cost sensors to be able to measure exactly what's going on in our coastline or deep oceans. Robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, digital medicine, artificial intelligence, and sensors. And AI is extraordinary. Artificial intelligence is going to be transforming every one of your lives this next 5 years, right? We think of Siri as that device we talk to on our iPhone. And that's a very primitive version of AI. But AI is the ability of a computer to understand what you're asking, the confusion you might have, the cynicism, the irony, whatever it is, and be able to search its memory banks and come up with the right answer for you. And we're going to see this pervading everything, where anyone with a cell phone can call up an AI and ask a question like, what's the best stock I should be investing in tomorrow? I ate this. Am I allergic to it? Whatever it might be. Imagine being able to have artificial intelligence as your financial advisor, as your physician. This is where we're going. We'll be talking about the implications of that, hopefully, in our Q&A. So let me actually set up this, this next video. I want to show you a video of an AI that was brought to market by IBM 2 years ago. It's called Watson. It's named after James Watson, the founder of IBM. And it's a computer that downloaded Wikipedia into its memory banks. And then what IBM did to demonstrate how epic Watson was they challenged the all-two-time Jeopardy champions, the guy who'd won the most games and the guy who'd won the most money. You can see them on the image there. And let me show you this, and then let's talk about it. But this is what it looks like to have an artificial intelligence hang you out to dry. Let's make sure we have the sound up, and here we go.
Ken, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
Oh, I've never said this on TV. Chicks dig me for 200, please, Jimmy.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city, mentioned in Joshua, showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson.
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct. Watson.
Who is Mary Leakey?
You're right. Watson.
What is Crete?
Yes.
Let's finish Chicks Dig Me.
Edmount.
So what was Watson? Watson was a room-sized computer, a little bit larger than this stage, not much more, that had some 2800 Core 7 processors, was not hooked up to the internet, had downloaded Wikipedia, was able to process 1 million books per second. But that was so 2 years ago. Which is strange to say, but so true. Since that time, what Michael Roden, who's a friend of mine, who teaches at Singularity University, who's a senior VP who oversees this, has done, is that they've uploaded Watson to the cloud. So Watson is now available on the cloud. They have created an open API, a user interface where entrepreneurs could build application layers on top of Watson, and then put $100 million into a venture fund to invest in new startups who use Watson to do cool things with it. The first place they're going is medical school. So I guarantee you, I forgot most everything I learned when I graduated medical school. But it's still the same today. The rate of change is so fast. There's no mortal human who can understand your blood results, let alone your MRI and your genome scan and all of the PET scans and all the data that you collect. But Watson can, because its ability to take that and download it into memory and look at all of the data, including a journal article released in Frankfurt that morning, is extraordinary. And so we're going to be heading towards a time where we're going to see AI becoming the adjunct to physicians, to nurses, ultimately to yourself, as your diagnostician and as your medical advisor. But Watson is only as good as the data you upload. Watson is now uploading data into fashion design, into finance, into cooking, into all kinds of things. So let me look at another technology. I'm just sharing a few of these things. I can speak for a week straight on this stuff. This is sensor technology. So this guy over here is Steven Sasson, the guy who invented the digital camera at Kodak Labs in 1976. And what most people don't know is that Kodak invented the digital camera, had the patents, had the first mover advantage on the technology that ultimately put them out of business. But they didn't understand the rate at which this exponential technology would grow. And in 2012, Kodak declared bankruptcy. And that camera, which took 0.01 megapixel images, 0.01, right, black and white, recorded on a tape drive, was ignored by the board of directors because it's a kid toy for kids. It's not. We make beautiful high-resolution images. Besides, we're in the paper and chemicals business. I mean, I grew up with Kodak. We all did. It was the brand that existed when you're on vacation in the Greek islands or wherever you were in the world. Poof, gone. Today, the digital camera is, a 10 megapixel camera. It's a few bucks. But this is where it is today, right? These sensors continue. It's 1 billion times better over the course of the last 30 plus years. But in 30 years from now, it's going to be 1 billion times better than the cameras we have today. Will it be high-definition cameras woven into the clothing of your fabric of your clothing or surrounding us constantly? Other sensors, this is the first inertial measurement unit. This is a device that guided us to Earth orbit and guided us to the moon. Tens of pounds, tens of millions of dollars. And this is where it is today. It's $1 on your phone. Right? But this is where it is today. It doesn't stop here. One of the things that we as humans do is we forget that we're not living in the most perfect time ever in human history. We sort of assume like, wow, we have this. We've arrived. But this continues to progress. What's it going to be 1,000 times better in 10 years or 1 million times better in 20 years? Molecular memory, again, in everything that we manufacture. This is the first GPS unit. 120,000 bucks, 53 pounds. Imagine this thing on a dashboard of your SUV, right? And of course, where it is today, a few bucks on your phone. And this sort of thing continues on and on and on. So we're seeing explosion in AI and robotics and sensor technology, but what's really going on as well in the world around us that, I was just addressing 400 of the top executives in the finance world this morning in Orlando. That's where I was. And this part is the most shocking part because it is changing the landscape of finance. So this is the world's population. We just crossed the 7 billion mark. This is internet penetration. In 2010, of that 7 billion people, roughly 1.8 billion of us have been connected online. By 2020, 5 years from now, that number is expected to have gone from 1.8 billion to a minimum of 5 billion people. That means that 3 billion new minds are coming online. These are 3 billion people who've never been connected before, who are coming online this decade, during your planning horizon, if you're an executive in a company, during our lifetimes, during all of that. Now the question is, what are these 3 billion new minds going to create? What are they going to consume? They represent tens of trillions of dollars of long-tail economy that's not being accounted for right now. If they're not your customers, they're your customers' customers. But the other thing that's interesting is they're not coming online like we did in the mid-90s with AOL at 9600 baud. Remember those dial-up modems? They're coming online at a megabit connection or better. They're coming online with access to the world's information on Google, where the poorest kid in Mumbai has got access to the same information as the billionaire in Manhattan. Right? A complete democratization. And it changes everything. It changes the way I look at the world. I look at the world as a place where the biggest problems are the biggest business opportunities. Where what I teach entrepreneurs is you want to become a billionaire, help 1 billion people. Where the number of people now looking to solve problems is not just the governments and the largest corporations, it's everybody. We can now stop complaining about problems and start solving problems. We can crowdsource incredible talent around the world to focus on solving your community's problem, your company's problem, your industry's problem. What is it? And a lot of times you don't want the expert in your company or community solving the problem, because the expert is the guy or gal who can tell you exactly how it can't be done. You want the person who's really blind to the barriers, who comes in with a crazy idea. Because what I want to remind us all is that the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. If it weren't a crazy idea, it wouldn't be a breakthrough. A little faster computer is not a breakthrough, but going from silicon, or going from vacuum tubes to silicon, that's nuts. So let me turn the table now to the discussion of crowdsourcing genius. I wanted to, in the first part, just talk about what's changing in the world. What's changing in the world is the number of connected individuals, the power of the technology that these individuals have. Right? Today, an entrepreneur has access to the technologies that were only possible for the largest governments and companies 20 years ago. It's a statement that I really want you to absorb 1 second, that today any entrepreneur has access to the technology and the capabilities that only the governments and largest corporations had 20 years ago. When I was on stage with President Clinton, I was saying, the kid in Mumbai on a smartphone, President Clinton, has access to more knowledge and information that you had when you were president. And he said, you're right. And that kid also has the ability to spin up 100 or 1,000 core processors on Amazon Web Cloud if they need AWS. So I believe it's how you challenge the world that's now important. What targets do you give people so they're additive to the world? And I want to share that with you. So my dream growing up as a child in Great Neck was passionate about spaceflight. It's what I cared about, what I dreamed about. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to fly. I went and dreamed those dreams. And ultimately, I gave up on NASA being the way that I was going to go. I did the calculations. Their admission rate was 1 out of 1,000 applications. And I realized that if I were going to apply, I'd have to be a government employee, do what I was told. I wasn't very good at that. It wasn't going to work out. And then one day, a friend of mine gave me a copy of Charles Lindbergh's book, The Spirit of St. Louis. And it changed my world. And that book talked about the fact that Lindbergh in 1927 crossed the Atlantic not on a whim, but to win a prize. There was a Frenchman, Raymond Ortegue, who was born under the Pyrenees Mountains in France, moved to New York penniless, worked his way up, eventually became the owner of the Hotel Lafayette, and offered up a prize for the first person to fly between his new home of New York and his birthplace of Paris. 9 different teams spent $400,000 trying to win that $25,000 prize. And I'm like, holy cow, 16 times the prize money. You don't back any of the losers. You only back the winner. What's not to like? And in the margins of the book, I wrote X prize for space. So the question was, in my mind, was going, could I, in fact, create a competition that would incentivize teams to build private spaceships that could take me and my friends into space? And because I had no idea who was going to put up the $10 million, since I didn't have it, I put X as a placeholder for the name of the eventual sponsor. No kidding. The prize rules were simple. I always like having as objective a prize as possible. $10 million was enough money to incentivize the entrepreneurs, but not the Lockheeds and the Boeings. I didn't want them coming in, nor would they play in this game. Privately funded meant you had to worry about every penny you were spending, so at the end of the game, this was a commercial product. 3 people meant that you could have a commercially viable product with a pilot and two paying passengers, or an autopilot and 3 very brave passengers. 100 kilometers altitude we defined as space. We originally had it at 100 miles altitude, and then we did the reentry, the thermal characteristics from coming in from 100 miles and said it was too hot for composites, and we lowered it from 100 miles, 100 kilometers. Unfortunately, knowing full well most Americans would know the difference anyway. And you had to do the 2 flights within 2 weeks. And so we announced this competition. It took me 6 years to find the Ansari family. The patrons of St. Louis put up the seed capital, a group of St. Louisans who call themselves the New Spirit of St. Louis organization. Very much like the foundation here, they stepped up and said, we want to do something that is going to pay dividends to our heritage and to our future. And so we, as an organization, had our headquarters in St. Louis, worked with St. Louisans, and worked in partnership with the St. Louis Science Center. Eventually, 6 years later, we were able to get the Ansari family to put up the $10 million. It took me a long time. 150 people said no. All the major benefactors, Richard Branson, Fred Smith, all the CEOs, all were too worried about what would happen if someone died. And again, when you become risk adverse, there is no radical progress. And I think one of the issues I have a problem with, and I talk about constantly, is that we become so risk adverse in society and in government that we're literally mortgaging our future to incrementalism. We can talk about that in Q&A if you want. But 26 teams stepped up from 7 countries. They spent $100 million to compete for this. And in 2004, on October 4th, Spaceship One made its second flight to 100 kilometers and won the prize. Here's the vehicle burning nitrous oxide laughing gas and tire rubber, polybutadiene as the fuel. Here she is at altitude. And then the winning moment at the bottom, the Ansari family, Anusha and Amir, myself, Paul Allen, who backed Burt Rutan, Brian Binney, then Richard Branson, who the week before the prize was won, came in and bought the rights to the winning technology. The McGillicuddies were there with me on that day, and after turning me down twice, right? So, and Richard has become a dear friend, and I tell him every day, I'm so thankful you did that, because had he funded the prize, he probably would not have been able to fund the follow-on, and he's committed over $250 million to commercializing Spaceship Two and really opening up spaceflight for the 9-year-olds and all of us. We had 10 billion media impressions around the world. We made the homepage of Google, which was very cool, with Spaceship One flying over the logo. And let me take you back there with a short video. So if we can have the sound up, here we go. We're announcing today something called the X Prize, a $10 million contest to privately build a spaceship that's able to carry 3 individuals, fly to 100 kilometers altitude, and do that twice inside of 2 weeks.
I have never been myself as creative as I have eyeballing this goddamn prize.
Hello and welcome to Mojave here in the high desert of California on this incredible day. Now you are going to witness history in the making.
Release. Arm. Fire.
The Ansari X Prize inspired international competition, drove regulatory reform, and made history.
The X Prize for $10 million.
It ignited a personal spaceflight revolution.
But the winning vehicle, Spaceship One, is now hanging in the Smithsonian right above the Apollo 11 capsule and next to the Spirit of St. Louis that inspired it in the first place. And thank you. And for the 9-year-old kid who dreamed about space, it's about, making your future happen, not waiting for someone else to materialize it. And this is, for me, one of the things I go around and talk to schools about and entrepreneurs all the time. There is nothing that's impossible. It's a matter of how dedicated are you to make it happen. It took me 10 years to go from having the idea to having the prize won. And like I say, it was an overnight success after 10 years of hard work. On the heels of that, it became a lot easier. I was able to recruit Larry Page, the CEO of Google, onto my board, and James Cameron, and Elon Musk, and Ray Kurzweil, and Jim Giannopoulos, and Wendy Schmidt, Dean Kamen, Craig Venter, Ratan Tata from India. And really, we as an organization look at what are the world's biggest problems? Problems that are stuck, that should be solved, that aren't being solved. And how can you launch an incentive prize to actually cause that problem for innovators to focus on it and disrupt it? Sometimes it's stuck because people say can't be done. Their belief system says cannot happen. Other times there's regulations that prohibit it. Other times there's no one going or no money flowing into the area. But ultimately, an incentive prize is one mechanism, is a single tool, to be clear, is a single tool in an innovation tool chest, but a very powerful one that's underutilized, and I'm so happy that Gulf Coast is beginning to use and play with. And I wish you all the extraordinary success so that in your success, you can do it again and others can follow in your footsteps. Because it's really about, we have so much cognitive genius in the world, so many brilliant people who want to do something with their lives, do something meaningful, and sometimes all they need is the excuse to give it a shot. And these prizes are that mechanism that change the conversation from what could be done to when is it going to happen and who's going to pull it off. So let me share with you some of the prizes that we're working on. So when the BP oil spill occurred in 2010 in the Gulf Coast, I started receiving phone calls. What can you do about this? Is there an X Prize? James Cameron had just joined our board, and he's an ocean fan, of course, as an explorer and a filmmaker. And we looked at, could we do anything around capping the spill? No, we wouldn't be allowed near there. But what we realized was that the technology for cleaning up oil spills between the Exxon Valdez in 1990 and the BP spill in 2010, nothing had changed. In fact, it was the same equipment being used in both locations. And it was a set of perverse incentives that kept it that way. So we said, we're going to do a prize to reinvent oil spill cleanup. Can we create a competition that cleans up the oil twice as fast on the ocean surface, so you clean it up there before it hits the coastline? And we put out a note to our board members. Wendy Schmidt, God bless her, in less than 12 hours raised her hand. We had a signed agreement the next day, and she funded what became known as the Wendy Schmidt Oil Cleanup X Prize. And she put up about $3.5 million, about $1.4 million in purse. This was an expensive prize to run, cost about $2 million to operate it. And the goal was to double the oil spill cleanup rate from 1,100 to 2,200 gallons per minute. And we got access to the world's largest oil spill cleanup test facility in New Jersey. And we had 350 teams enter. I had no idea what 350 teams even thinking about how to clean up oil spill. We narrowed it down to the top 10 finalists who delivered their equipment 9 months later to this facility. We went head to head. 7 of the top 10 teams, and all these teams were under 100 people. The majority of them were pure startups created to solve this problem who knew nothing about oil spill cleanup. One was a family out of Alaska. One of the teams that doubled the oil spill cleanup rate, I kid you not, was a team that met in a Las Vegas tattoo parlor. That tattoo artist was the designer, and one of his customers was his funder. They built a scale model in the guy's jacuzzi. And the first time it saw oil and water at scale was in this facility. It still doubled the existing 20-year-old technology. The winning technology increased oil spill cleanup rate 600%. So why hadn't that existed? So I'm going to see if this video plays. If not, if it is, you'll see what it is. If not, I won't tell you about it.
My full-time job back home is running a tattoo studio in Las Vegas.
We get asked all the time, we go, how long have you been in the oil industry? And well, counting today.
So one of the beautiful things about incentive prizes is you never know where the talent's going to come from. Because I guarantee you 99 of 100 people would not have funded this team. but it's about cognitive genius out there. And it's about, one of the beautiful things about prizes is you don't back just one winner. The traditional way of doing philanthropy was, oh, I'm going to pick you. I'm going to back your idea. And you hope that person, based on their track record, has the best idea. And you're happy at 30 cents on the dollar going towards the idea as actual implementation versus everything else going on. In an incentive prize, the metrics are completely flipped. You back everybody, you get 10 to 40 times the prize money spent to try and win the prize. And the crazy ideas that might be the breakthroughs get the equal play as the conservative ideas. And you actually measure on impact and merit. And oh, by the way, you don't just back one team. At the end, the winner may not be the best one, but you have 6 or 7 companies that have come out of it, and you have an industry launched. And so I just think it's one of the most underutilized tools inside companies, inside foundations, inside communities, inside industries for really driving breakthroughs. You know, you're going to do one on your own, and I think that's amazing. And again, I've offered Terry, you know, as much as we can help you succeed. But I think of this as a tool because we're living in a world where people are more and more empowered than ever before. And many people are looking for great challenges to where to focus their time and where to focus their energy. So what are you passionate about? What do you care about? Where would you launch an incentive competition? Where would you drive the most brilliant minds in the world, whether in Kazakhstan or Mumbai or, you know, Beijing, to focus on your problem? I'll give you a couple of X Prizes we're working on right now. 3.5 years ago, I had a lunch with Paul Jacobs, the chairman of Qualcomm Foundation. And I was saying, you know, Paul, my dream is I want to give birth to that tricorder device out of Star Trek. He goes, I love the tricorder. And I go, I want to do a tricorder X Prize. Remember that thing that Dr. McCoy on Star Trek had, and would say, you know, Jim, she's an alien. You know, be able to tell, she's really a human, sorry. And so Qualcomm Foundation put up $20 million. $10 million for the prize, $10 million for operations. Doing these things right isn't cheap. We announced it at the opening of the Consumer Electronics Show, CES. And it's for a device, a handheld device, not for a doctor or for a nurse. It's for a mom or a dad. It's for any of us at 2 in the morning when you're sick or your kid is sick. And this is a device you can talk to. It's got Watson on the cloud. You can tell it what you're feeling, ask you questions, whatever the case might be. You can cough on it. It can do the RNA or DNA analysis of the pathogens in your sputum. You do a finger blood prick in your blood chemistries. And in success, is supposed to be able to diagnose you better than a group of physicians, which I think isn't so hard. Unfortunately. I come from a family of doctors, so anyway, we had 330 teams enter this competition from around the world. We're down to the top finalists. 10 finalists will have a winner this year. We think at least 3 of the teams will qualify to win. But this is about democratizing access to diagnostics. Now, to be very clear, puns aside, we're going to be short 100,000 doctors in the United States by 2020. We can't build enough medical schools or teach enough doctors. And that's great compared to the rest of the world, right? Africa's got 25% of the disease burden and 1.2% of the healthcare workers. You can't scale medical care in Africa with humans and hospitals. Doesn't happen. But you can with this. So this is about democratizing it. And what we're going to be generating here is version 0.9 of the tricorder. It's only good for 15 disease states, but it will expand. But it's the beginning. It's the beginning. The next prize that we launched that I'm very proud of as the father of 2 3.5-year-old twin boys is the Global Learning X Prize. It's a $15 million challenge. And the numbers are the following. There are about 1 billion illiterate people on planet Earth. 2/3 of them are women. 250 million of them are kids. And they live in parts of the world that you will never build enough schools or teach enough teachers. We're not scalable at that rate. And so this challenge is one that's been offered up. that asks a team to build a piece of software that can operate on any Android tablet or phone that can take a child where there's nothing and take them from illiteracy to basic reading, writing, and numeracy in 18 months. So this has to be able to take that child, understand its language skills, its favorite colors, sports star, music, whatever it is, engage that student, because if the student puts the device down, never picks it up again, the team's lost. It has to be fun, has to be, to use a term that you shouldn't use with education, addictive in some fashion. And it has to engage them in a fashion and then take them along that arc on their own. We announced it. We still have open team registration. We're about 400 teams that have registered so far. My goal is that we'll get close to 1,000 teams. And then, unlike the other prizes where the teams own their intellectual property, in this competition, we're going to narrow it down to 5 teams. All 5 get $1 million finalist purse. Then they go into the field, and each of them get a population of a couple of thousand kids. We're in one of the sub-Saharan African countries we're doing this in. This has to teach them their native language and English, basic reading, writing, and numeracy. And then we measure these devices in the field to understand very quantitatively what's happened, but then qualitatively how it's impacted and improved their lives. The winner gets $10 million on top of the $1 million they got. But unlike the other prizes, in this case, that winner writes over their software to open source. And my goal is that this piece of software then gets put on every phone, every device manufactured. So thank you. So every device then becomes a teacher. Now, this is not about replacing teachers. This is about giving people the basics they need to be able to teach themselves. And then it's our responsibility to teach people empathy and to teach people how to be human and how to be good citizens and how to be, yes. And I've gotten very very conscious of that as a parent, and also don't want to be making the belief that technology can take over our responsibility as parents, as teachers, as humans. But this does give them an extraordinary potential, because when they get connected with that megabit connection and access to all of this, now they can start using that knowledge. So where are we going next? We have a sizable number of prizes in different stages of development. One of my favorites is a Transporter X Prize. Not quite the transporter from Star Trek. This Transporter X Prize is a device you step into. Think of it as an autonomous electric helicopter that can pick you up in your backyard and take you where you want to go. So I'm serious. It's an autonomous electric helicopter. You want one? I do. So I'll do a slight commercial, which is the Roddenberry family, creators of Star Trek, are funding, put up $5 million for the prize, for half the prize. We're looking for the person who's going to co-fund with them, but this is ready to launch, and we believe this will be one of the most exciting, sexiest X Prizes that we have, and that we'll have a winner in 3 years' time, and it's about reinventing transportation. So if you're interested in the Transporter X Prize and working with the Roddenberry family from Star Trek, let me know. We're working with a black fizzy soda company to create the Happiness X Prize. Very excited about that prize. I won't mention what company they're from, but they're from Atlanta. But I want you to imagine the following. If I asked you yesterday or last Friday or a month ago, what were you doing during the day when you were happiest? Would you know? Most of us know in the moment, if I said, are you happy? Yeah, I'm happy. But we don't actually continuously know what we're doing that makes us happiest during the day. So what if you could actually measure your state of happiness throughout the day and say, when I'm doing this, I'm happier. When I'm doing this, I'm sadder. I want to do more of that stuff. So this is a 2-part prize, which would be the first is to actually measure physiologically when we're actually happier, so we can help people do the things that bring them happiness more and less of the other. And then the second part is probably a corporate against corporate competition, where we would have corporations adopt the technology and then look at what are the practices that you could do in your company that you publicly announce you're doing, and then which of these practices actually create better productivity and a better place to work, and have that be sort of a fun ice bucket challenge, but between companies. And then organogenesis is another prize we're focused on, which is today, if you need an organ transplant, how many folks here have been touched by someone in your family needing an organ transplant of any type? So a good number, about 10%. You know, today you have to wait for someone to die before you typically get an organ transplant, which is going to sound very barbaric in the near future. And our goal is a prize around two things. One, going from a stem cell to a transplantable heart, liver, lung, or kidney, or being able to 90-some-odd% of all organs that are donor organs are lost because there's no recipient ready for that organ. So can we cryopreserve organs and have a bank of organs that are available when they're needed by people? It really help hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. I'll mention as the last thing, one of the things we do, we launch 2 or 3 X Prizes a year. These are typically $2 to $30 million competitions. And because we have a huge amount of interest, we just created a new platform that we just rolled out called HeroX. It's a separate company. It's run by a rock star CEO, Christian Cottaccini. And it's a platform that allows you to use the crowd to help design, fund, judge, operate, and scale and promote prizes. Just one example, the city of San Antonio put up a challenge for $500,000, and it's to actually do sort of technology entrepreneurship joint ventures between San Antonio and Mexico, and they've got 100 teams competing in this already. But again, one of the things I'm out to do is to help promote not X Prize or HeroX, but just the concept of crowdsourcing genius. We're living in a world today where there are more people able to solve and take on actions than ever before. How you tap into those individuals is something that's very important for us to learn, for your company, for your community, for your organization, whatever it might be. So I will leave this. By the way, if you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint deck, if you text your first name and email to that number, only first name and email, my server will send you a copy of the deck. So that, and you also, I said, just FYI, I put out a weekly tech blog on Sundays, and you'll have an option for that as well. But an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'd love to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions?
Right in front here.
With the wonderful wand that you just described about teaching children, do you think you could program that to help autistic children knowing their individual problems?
So great question, and an important question. And I think, yes, more now than ever, more than ever before, we're going to enter a period of time where we can understand a child's specific needs for how they learn, how they're distracted, what they need. One of the areas I teach about a lot that I think is going from deceptive to disruptive this year is also virtual worlds. The virtual technologies. We're seeing every major company from Facebook with Oculus Rift and Google with Magic Leap and Microsoft with its Holo viewers entering that world. And I think autistic children are going to have a better chance than ever to learn and to begin to become functional more than ever before. I'll also mention that we're working with the Barbara Bush Foundation to launch an adult literacy X Prize. 10% of adults are illiterate in the United States. 10%. Crazy. Another population that I think can be really addressed. Another question, please. Chuck. And then the lady in blue here. Yes. Did Stanley Kubrick have it right about AI? Do we have to worry about how? So that's a great question and an important one. And a number of my friends, Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, have gone on record recently sort of raising the levels of concern about the dangers of artificial intelligence. I also know a lot of the top thinkers in the area who are not concerned. The answer is, honestly, Chuck, I don't know. I think that the one thing that I believe a few fundamental things. One, the government can't regulate against this stuff. So it's not government regulation. I can use an analogy, which is in the early days of gene jockeying, of genetic engineering, back in the late 70s and early 80s, it was very concerning when restriction enzymes came out and our ability to cut out genes and manipulate genes. And there was a very similar cry that came out that said, oh my God, we're going to create killer viruses, we're going to start pandemics, we're going to destroy the world, we're manipulating the functioning of life. And there was a lot of thinking about how do we regulate this, And what happened was that the leaders in the industry got together instead at a place, I think it was pronounced Asilomar, and had a series of meetings where they, as a team, as an organization, as a community of leaders said, okay, this is powerful stuff we're playing with. How do we set up the guidelines for self-regulation? And I think that is, Asimov's rules of robotics, which really were rules of AI. I think that the community is having those conversations now about how do we self-regulate. I believe that ultimately the more knowledgeable and smarter an intelligence is, the more peaceful it is. I get concerned about the toddler stage. When my kid has something heavy and is hitting against the glass window, not realizing what that could do. So that's the concerning part, not the end state, but what happens in the interim, from my point of view.
Can we take this question here,
yes, please?
Welcome to Sarasota. We are thrilled you came, I can assure you. So how does the X Prize model work with respect to human conflict? So, for example, there's a long and perhaps a wicked problem in the Middle East. Is there an X Prize potential application to solving that kind of conflict?
So, great question. And I will say that I haven't seen it work yet. There is a prize called the Mo Ibrahim Prize. Mo Ibrahim was a very successful mobile phone operator who put up a large cash prize, about 10 million or so, that is accessible to any African nation ruler who steps down and leaves a democracy in their stead. The challenge, of course, is that $10 million can be a mere pittance in that. So driving human, prizes are much better when it's a thing. It's an airplane or a rocket ship or a tricorder device or a device to measure happiness. The question is, if we have better knowledge about what we're measuring, if we have better knowledge about what's going on, and I'll close this on the following thought. Most evil doing occurs in darkness, where people can do things without the world watching. Women, children are oppressed in places like that. Technology is heading, so for example, one of the groups I was just reading about is a group that is now trying to oppress poaching of elephants in Africa. And what they're doing is using drones to do full-time patrolling of that. So as we are deploying high-definition video satellite constellations, drones, and so forth, where we can see everything going on, I think this is going to start to change human behavior, because you can't do something and say, I didn't do it anymore. Sir.
Peter, you're probably getting so many ideas for X Prizes. And for example, someone may say, can we solve cancer? Can we solve diabetes and so on? And you've got to make decisions about that. But could you put out a list of those suggestions that you're not handling that deserve thinking about X Prizes? Maybe other groups, without competing with you, not offering 110 million, might want to, like even at my university, Northwestern University, we might like to tackle a bunch of problems. Can we find a list of the problems you haven't tackled on your network?
So I think we put out a annual prize catalog of all the prize ideas that we have. I'm just peter@xprize.org is my email, very simple. If you send me your name and address, I can forward it and have it sent to you. But I think it's also on our website. I think it's a digital download on our xprize.org website. And listen, my goal, I'm not worried about competition. You know, my mantra, my drumbeat is go do something. Go do something. You know, I've had the pleasure to know Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and I openly say I don't agree with the Giving Pledge. I don't think the Giving Pledge is the right thing. I think it should be an impact pledge. I think rather than just giving your money, what people should be doing is pledging to solving a problem. I think it should be, thank you. You know, I'm not going to give the money to this. With my money, I'm going to take down diabetes. With my money, I'm going to take down osteoporosis. I'm going to take down child abuse. You're welcome, Press. Top of mind. The number one killer, age 0 to 4 of children in the world is child abuse. Yes. So but yes, open to competition, open to lots of competition. Just go do stuff.
Why isn't Gates saying to the 134 billionaires who've already pledged, why don't you stick, because there's a box for each one, and you get the box and you find out what they say they're going to do, but I think that's the point you want to try.
My conversation with Steve Forbes, I said the Forbes list gamifies wealth aggregation. I don't want to drop from number 34 to number 35, so I'm going to sort of hold on to it. And I really want to try and get him or The Economist or someone else to put, you know, not the Forbes 400 or whatever it is, but the impact list of what are the people in the world creating the biggest impact on the planet.
Two quick questions. The first one is, how is the group that decides the winner composed? And then secondly, what happens to those who don't win the competition?
Great. So we create a judging panel that is identified and completely separate from any teams, any X Prize management, anybody. It's like a set of experts that are agreed to as third-party individuals who are the judges. When we announce an X Prize, we announce it as a set of guidelines, not rules yet, guidelines, and then we put it out there for a couple months, ask for feedback from the world. Where have we messed up? What rule is wrong? What should be corrected? Ask the teams for feedback. We look at the feedback, we do a judging, then we announce a set of final rules. We have a contract called a master team agreement, which says if you do this, we contractually will pay you this, and these judges are the arbiters. And that's the contract we sign with every team that competes. And then the judges have to look at those rules. And there's different judges for the Qualcomm tricorder. I don't even know who most of those people are. And then the teams that lose, our goal is that the competition is structured such that there's a back-end business model. So even the team that try but lose have still gone significantly forward and can commercialize on the back end of what they're doing. So we're driven to create an industry versus a single point solution. That may not always happen, but that's our objective.
Peter, I was wondering if you had any thoughts or comments about the notion of privacy and metadata in the context of like Citizen4.
So, wow, I do. It's off subject a little bit here, but I think to a great degree the concept of privacy is in our past. I think that, like it or not, it's become extremely difficult to keep anything in private. We leave a digital trail in everything we do. And we're heading towards a world, if you guys have seen the Google autonomous car, right? On the roof of that car is a LiDAR, a laser imaging radar. It's got 60 eye-safe lasers, are generating 750 megabytes of data per second. It's seeing everything within 100 meters range. A person walking, a person being pickpocketed, a squirrel going up a tree. It's seeing everything. That's one car. Millions of those cars are creating an image visualization of everything going on within view of the car. On top of that, we have at least 3 private constellations today in orbit, space constellations, some of them generating high-definition video. You can watch your competition's supplies being delivered to the factory, their final product coming out. You can count the number of cars in the parking lots. And that's from satellites. There'll be 5 or 6 additional constellations. And then besides that, we'll have drones. FAA is coming out with regulations for commercial use of drones. But even if it's against the laws, the drones are going to become so cheap, so throwaway, so anonymous, there'll be drones flying everywhere, imaging everything. We've got, basically whatever Google Glass becomes, looking at millimeter resolution. We're seeing, I have to teach my kids, there's everything you do is being seen and goes on permanent record. When I was a kid, I was a teenage terrorist, and I'm so thankful that stuff didn't exist. But now it matters, right? Your college admissions look at what your Twitter feed is, your Facebook feed is, and it's like, anonymity is gone. What will happen, will not happen, I don't know, but I don't count on it. That's just my view of it.
And there's one last question. The last question way back there, Mandy. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Gabriel Hammond, and all eyes are on what's going to happen with the redevelopment of this bayfront, and a group of visionary leaders have come up with a set of guiding principles around which the development will revolve. What is your best advice for us going forward?
For the development of the bayfront?
Right here. We have a bayfront parking lot. We can do better.
Wow. So, I'm not sure I'm not the right person to ask about that. But, I think, have a contest?
There you go. There you go. All right. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Peter. He'll be out.